We have a major problem with how we ramp new account executives. Your new AEs are being declared ramped at 3 or 6 months, but can they actually run discovery or execute the sales process without you jumping in to save them? Most can't, and that's the problem. Most sales teams ramp reps based on time in seat and not capability-based onboarding where you certify your new sellers. So I built a playbook full of frameworks, implementation roadmaps, and infrastructure guides that cut ramp time in half and have proven to improve win rates by 75%, and it's completely free. So stop this episode right now and go and download the Sales Readiness Playbook at therevenueenabler.com or use the link in the description below. Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Hit Your Numbers podcast. Today I am joined by Simon. Hey Simon, how's it going?
Yeah, good. Thanks, James. Thanks for having me.
No, looking forward to the conversation. And today we're talking about how to drive more pipeline and ultimately revenue with SDR and AE pods, but also I think really nailing that ICP piece, which I know you've been doing a lot of hard work on recently, Simon. So just before we jump into that, maybe just give the listeners the 30,000 foot view. Who are you? What have you been up to? Just for context, and then we can jump into the conversation.
Yeah, of course. So my name is Simon. I work at a company called BeyondTrust. Essentially, BeyondTrust, what we do is we help companies reduce cyber risk by securing identities and access across their entire environment by protecting privileged users, human, non-human identity. With the rise of AI, it's a big sort of topic at the moment, but essentially mitigating the impact of breaches and insider threats through least privilege. So I joined here just over two years ago now. Came in as a SDR manager looking after UK and Northern Europe. And sort of since then I've progressed into a senior manager, and coming down the line is I'll be looking after sort of the whole of the international region outside of America, which is frightening, but also it's a really good time to really sort of double down on a lot of things that we've been working on the last sort of 18 months. And a lot of the things that we're going to talk about today have been sort of the guiding principles, I think, that have led us to the success that we've had in that time frame for sure.
Yeah, and we'll probably get into that today. But from your experience, like I know you've been really obsessing over this recently, what actually makes a really strong ICP in your perspective? And how do you find that? And then a couple of quarters later, how do you know that that was the right thing to double down on? Maybe you could just talk us through that to start with.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's always, you've got to be method behind the madness in our sort of SDR world. And we were, especially in the UK market, we went through a process with the AEs about mastering, taking clients on journeys, prospects on journeys. But then we actually then stripped it all back and looked at it and went, right, where are we winning? Why are we winning? How are we winning? And then from there, what we actually did is we analysed over 1,800 closed lost deals from the previous 2 years. Using AI, I will mention that as we get into it, and with our sales ops team, and that enabled us to really sort of look at, win rates, speed of win rates, opportunities where we were selling more than one product. We're a platform with 6 products, and essentially order values, client life cycles, and that helped us determine sort of what we thought was a customer profile. We then matched that against industry news like Gartner, for example, Forrester Wave, who are sort of the thought leaders within our space. And that then helped us sort of plot on a graph, so to speak, sort of what is the ideal customer profile for our commercial space, and then also what is enterprise as well. So 2 very different areas. And you know what? There wasn't much too dissimilar findings within that, but the key thing was the trigger events, which I'll talk through in a second. But essentially, what we then determined was, if us as SDRs are taking ICP priority 1 opportunities to the AEs, the AEs are going to be more excited, they're going to be more engaged, and it allows us to then carry that deal all the way through the process in a succinct manner, which ultimately has resulted in, looking at the results that we've looked at today in our leadership meeting, was 85% roughly, if you match in enterprise and commercial, are of our opportunities are now in that ICP space. We are still working ones outside, but they are ones that we are more engaged with the partners on, sort of the lower hanging sort of fruit that doesn't quite fit our profile. But we've made some great successes. So it was looking at the data, then the puzzle behind that, and then creating a really clear, succinct message, not only for SDRs, but also for the sales reps as well.
Yeah. I got a load of questions, but my gut tells me is there was a lot of like thought that went into this. This wasn't a chat around the coffee machine because the pipeline is down, and we said screw it, let's just change things. It sounds like this was a proper project. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to take all the credit for it, but our VP of Sales, Matt Ward, for the UK and I did a lot of this work, and I'm hanging off his coattails. But I have given him a shout out for that. But fundamentally, yeah, it was we want to be at the cutting edge, not only in technology and what we sell, but in terms of leading our customers through a journey, through our Bowtie journey, as we call it, sort of before the sale and after the sale. And how can we be the trailblazers in our in the UK and the international markets to then take that and then push it out across the rest of the organization. So we were very much sort of the guinea pigs, one might say, for the project. But my goodness, the results have been, from reorganizing, which will come on to like the pod structure in terms of the AE, the BDR, SDR, solution engineer engagements, through to Zoom info, through to outreach, through to Salesforce. There are a lot of pieces in that, but once we aligned it all now, the results are definitely making waves. And we only started this and rolled it out at our SKO back at the start of January.
Okay. Wow. So you're already seeing what, like 6-8 weeks in, starting to see the impact. And I can imagine a couple of quarters out, you start to really see a massive dent, and that will build confidence across the whole of go-to-market. That not only was that exercise helpful, but actually I think what it teaches us a lot is actually I say this all the time, and I don't know if you feel this. Sometimes we spend so much time in the business, not so much on the business. And sometimes you have to take a step back. And one of the things that I did when I was building Staff Circle, which was a HR tech business, and it's just a bit frustrating, it took so long to figure this out. But we really found significant win rates north of 50% if we looked at in Sales Navigator at the account, and you look at the distribution of those departments on like a pie chart. When we found HR was above a certain percentage, we knew that they'd significantly invested in people, which meant why would they not enable them with technology to go and do that job better, versus, I'm making this up, a company with 150 people and little old Mary in the back office with no windows in her office, probably don't see much value in HR, probably not going to go and spend 50 to 100 grand on a HR platform to make her life a little bit easier and drive business outcomes. So it's not just about the classic, which I see all of the time. We sell to 250 to 1,000 person businesses in the UK in the manufacturing industry. There is a lot more to it, right? And you mentioned triggers and signals, which we'll get into. But I guess that was the helpful part, is because you had a group of people in the business say, let's actually work this as a project. You could take a step back and have a proper look from the outside in at what is and isn't working, and then get curious and kind of go from there. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, 100%. Obviously we are blessed being the organisation that we are, with the with the sales operations, marketing operations support that we have. But I think it is, once you've identified that, and again, I think I remember when I started as an SDR, it was I worked in recruitment, and I plugged in the technology space as well. I was really dialed in, and I would just go in and I'd literally load up, give me all the IT resellers in the UK, and I'm just going to call all of them. And that's not the way the world is now. The world has moved on, and again, back when I was an SDR, very rarely was there cold emails. It was all calls. So the mailboxes are fuller. The defenses that organizations have in terms of spam filters, blacklist, domains, etc. It is getting harder to cut through that noise. But if you can go in there with a targeted approach, with trigger events, use cases, statistics, it still does work, but you've got to be able to back it up. And that then comes in. It's all well and good going out, going, right, these are our, rather than having an account list of 500 accounts, let's find the best 50 based on ICP, based on intent signals, all that good stuff. But then it's about, right, the people inside as well. So the people, if there's been a trigger, for example, a compliance issue in our world, or they've had a breach or something like that, who are the people that are actually going to genuinely care? Because you've got, you're above the lines, your VP, C-level executives, you're on the line, which is your managers day to day, and then you've got your below the line, which are your users. You've got to be able to gather intel with a different message to each one. So that's like the second part of the ICP, isn't it? Yeah, you can nail the ICP, but if you can't then nail the message and the person, but it is a process. Yeah, you can't just send a message out to somebody. You've got to follow that process of ICP, persona, message, triggers, then it's down to execution, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. I was doing an exercise with a sales organization the other week on site, and we were building account hypothesis and like POV
Yeah.
engineering, so that now we've got the set of accounts that we really want to penetrate. How do we create really compelling messaging? And we just did really simple. I got a little framework that we used. They took a photo of it up on the big screen, dumped it into GPT, and said, based on this template, I'm meeting making this up, VP of HR at this company. Here's a website.
Yeah.
Can you go and do the research and fill in all of the content? Okay. And then it built this hypothesis. And one of the things it pulled in was their financial data. So it showed over the last 3 years how revenue has grown, but EBITDA is staying the same, or profitability is staying the same or dropping. And then it hypothesized why that might be happening, aligned back to what that organization sells, so that they can now take a really powerful message to that organization. Now, back in the day, doing that manually, I remember BT's annual report's like 256 pages. Yeah. Like trying to read that thing would just take you forever. So you'd skip it, or maybe just do the first couple of pages, the chairman's letter. Where now we can hypothesize on lots of information very quickly, build a point of view, and then go to market with that account. Yeah. And that is another layer of it that I think can come into it by, how is their financial data changing? And would that then warrant us going from tier 1 to tier 2?
Yeah.
Does that kind of come into the play of things?
Oh, 100%. I mean, I'll use where this example of ICPs really sort of hit home to me was Northern Europe again is one of the territories that the team I lead covers, and we've got a cloud-based just-in-time access product, which is a new product into our portfolio, and in Northern Europe can be a little bit, there can be tech hubs, a lot of cloud-based businesses in that area. So one of our BDRs like, right, I want to run a sales play into Northern Europe for this specific product. So we're speaking with the AE, and they found that they had one win with that product. I think it was in Sweden, and it was with an energy technology company. So the old school way was, right, let's go the whole of Sweden, let's go after all of them. But then what they did is they looked at what was the original message that we sent and what was the original talk track to that business. Then we looked at, right, that company there was 750 employees in that territory. And then we actually then looked at, so they're going to the whole of Sweden, not postcodes, but what region within Sweden is that? So then we looked at and go, right, let's go and pull all the companies between 250 and 750 employees in 100 miles, for example, of that company we sold to, and who was the person that we booked the original meeting with, and who are their sort of sideways personas or people at that level. And then what we did is we actually found 15 companies in that space, and we know that we could book the meeting because we had the right message, because it got us the original meeting, as we said, to adapt it into certain language and triggers. But out of those 15 companies, and I'm showing 5 hands up, out of 15 companies, all right, we actually then booked 7 meetings because we knew the message, we knew the ICP, we knew everything about it. That's how, would you rather go and send 100 blanket messages, 100 random calls, or and that takes days and weeks and months to build, or do you go off those specific companies? And that's where it really hit home to me. So if I was in their shoes now, that list of companies you put in, say, in Zoom Info for your territory, right, how do we now dig into that? How do you work with the AEs from their knowledge to tie in and go, right, I know that company, we had a closed loss opportunity there 2 years ago, they're a competitor, build out a list of 50 accounts maximum, and then from there, what is the repeatable message, what is the repeatable talk track? Because look, we're creatures of habit. We can nail a talk track, nail a message, it gets ingrained in our medulla oblongata, as I say, and then from there, we're then able to scale.
Welcome back to the Hit Your Numbers podcast. Today I'm joined by Matt Bruce. Hey Matt, how's it going?
Hey James, how are you?
I'm doing well, thanks. Doing really well.
Lovely.
And today we're going to be talking about building pipeline in 2026, but also really focusing on some of the mistakes that we can be avoiding, maybe some of the changes that we've seen over the last 12 months, and kind of get into the conversation. So I don't know if you want to give the listeners maybe just a really quick introduction into who you are, a bit about your background, just for context, and then we can jump into the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've worked in different organizations over the years, but ultimately over the last kind of 10 or 15 years ran sales organizations, commercial organizations looking for growth. And I've worked in organizations that are PE backed, and I've worked in lots of smaller organizations that maybe family ran or going on that kind of growth journey. Over the course of the last 2 or 3 years, I founded a business called More, and More essentially kind of specialize in outsourced business development. So we work with different companies that are looking to increase market share, provide new business opportunities to their sales teams, and essentially kind of grow pipeline. So I know it's something that we're going to get onto, but I've definitely kind of sat on both sides of the fence, working for vendors, and in that technology space more than anything. And then, like I said, in the last kind of handful of years, definitely worked in that space where we're working alongside those vendors in helping them secure new business revenue.
Nice. And do you know what? Before we jump to this podcast, I did wonder when I asked you to do an intro, will you let the listeners know that you had the absolute pleasure of managing me when I was a sales rep?
Twice.
Twice. Yeah. Unfortunately, you are mad enough not to do it once and get rid of me, but also do it again. So,
Absolutely. And obviously
yeah,
we've
we've
used
had
you
that
for training
luxury.
as well here at More. So yeah, three times. Three
Three
times.
times. There we go.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
Must be something. Must be something. You
Mm,
can't get rid of me, mate. I'm just going to be
mm,
around forever.
no comment.
Um, yeah, there we go. Cool. All right. So yeah, it's really good to kind of segue because yeah, likewise, I've also been very similar journey, been a rep, led a couple of teams, and now work on the vendor side. So working like you guys work with a bunch of different organizations, lots of different shapes and sizes. We're just speaking about that. From your perspective, then, like being on the vendor side and also being like in the business as well, building those teams. How has that kind of shaped your view of like the pressures around pipeline creation in general?
Oh, good question. So I think there's a couple of points here. I think firstly, I think it gives you the empathy. I think the understanding is really important. So I think when we go now and talk to kind of sales and marketing leaders, you kind of put yourselves in their shoes, and you're able to do that because you've got those tombstones, you've got those experiences of kind of what's gone before. And I think one of the beauties of kind of my experiences, I suppose, not that my experiences are unique by any stretch of the imagination, but because I've worked in different organizations selling different products and services, you actually understand that every business is different and the mechanics of every business is different. Whether that's there's PE money involved, which has a slightly different dynamic, or whether you've got a small sales team and loads of sophisticated resources around you, or you've got nothing, right? I've been in all of those types of organizations. So I suppose it gives you that, like I said, the empathy to truly understand the challenges that individual is going through on a day-to-day basis. I suppose the second thing that again you're putting yourself in their shoes, but you truly understand the pressures of the role. I think it's really easy for us to sit here and say we're sales leaders, we've gone through whatever experience it is to get into the place that we are today, but the pressures of running sales teams, regardless of the shape and size of the organization, is a drain, right? Anybody that's done that, anybody that's running a sales operation, anybody that's in a sales role should understand that it's not easy. um, so I think again, putting yourself in the shoes of the individual that you're engaging with about their individual challenges and the pressures that come with I haven't got enough pipeline, or I'm struggling to recruit the right people, or I'm struggling to create the right behaviors. Um, Having been in both of those seats allows me to resonate.
Yeah, I think the empathy one's really, really important because I don't know about you, but you spend 5 minutes on LinkedIn. I desperately try not to do it anymore. I actually bought one of these things. Have you heard of the brick before, by the way?
Yeah,
Really,
yeah,
really
yeah.
good. You used it over Christmas. I think I had like my phone bricked for like 170 hours or something like that, just because
I caught myself like just scrolling the news feed, and I'm like, what the fuck am
Mm,
I doing? This is just full of nonsense anyway. But
yeah.
I don't know about you, but you spend 5 seconds on LinkedIn and there's, some spotty teenager that's never actually built a sales organization before, but they're selling an outbound ebook for $57 that's going to save the day. Or, you see an account executive that works at, a public company or like a household brand. They've managed to close a couple of deals over a couple of years, and they think they can go out and, build an
Mm,
outbound agency, or they can go out and do a sales training program. And I'm like, you actually need to be in that role of your buyer, ideally, if
mm,
you can, to actually truly understand the pressure, like, and all of the different things that go into that role, so that when you then come in, it's probably why your business is growing really quickly, is because people know that you've done the hard part.
mm.
So when you then think
Yeah.
about building a business and the solutions, you're building something to solve the problem that you faced all those years,
Mm.
and you know how to solve it because you've been able to overcome it when you was the VP of sales. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely, and I think it all comes down to approach, and we always end up in a position, especially when we're talking to actually no, when we're talking to our existing customers and when we're talking to new prospects, right? We always end up in a position where there's a layer of consultancy that comes with it, and I think that's naturally kind of our approach to the market anyway. But I think there is that genuine drive and determination to provide a layer of expertise and understanding to actually remove some of that short-term panic, which typically sets in and sometimes is the reason why we're engaged, and actually kind of wind it back a little bit to the overall objective of, we've got a strategy, we've got a plan, there's a bump in the road, I understand the bump in the road, how are we going to tackle it and how can we tackle it together? So and I agree with you, right? I think the there's a lot of noise out there. I saw an Elon Musk quote the other day around kind of 98% of stuff that's on LinkedIn is rubbish, right? And that is that's the go-to. And I'm not necessarily saying that I'm in agreement with that stat, but there is a lot of noise out there, right? There's a
Yeah,
lot of noise. There's a lot of get rich quick. There's a lot of vanity projects, and anybody that's truly kind of operated in a sales leadership role or a marketing role, or led their own business, knows that it's very, very rarely is their success overnight. Okay.
yeah,
In 99.9% of all examples that you can point to, you know that you've got to put the hard yards in, and it's not going to happen overnight. Whereas I think that there is, like I said before, a lot of that noise out there which makes you think that actually I can go and buy some automation software and I can go and drag some data off a chat GPT or on a website and send a load of emails out there, and guess what, loads of people are going to come buying. Well, the reality of that is that if it was that easy, well, we'd all be super successful, and we wouldn't need to listen to things like this, or we wouldn't need to absorb other bits of content and do other things in order to kind of drum up business if it was that easy. So there is a
yeah.
lot of noise out there. I think generally, I think the sales leaders and like I said, marketing leaders understand those challenges, but sometimes just need pointing in the right direction. And like I said before, going back to the original question, I think some of the experiences that I've got of being sat on both sides enable us to have a real consultative approach to how we talk to the market.
Yeah, I agree. I'm in a bunch of these like WhatsApp groups for like sales leaders and things like that I've just not left since I quit my job to start this business, and it's just terrifying, the questions that come up in there. Like, we're constantly like refreshing our tech stack, and I'm like, dude, if it was easy to just go in the market, buying
Mm,
5 or 6 tools, spending $100,000 and building a really big business, none of us would get paid anywhere near as much as we do. The opportunity wouldn't be so great. Like, we would just be doing just general admin roles, right? Like, it isn't about that. Those things are important, but it's about really understanding. And I guess that leads us into our next question, which I obsess over whenever I take in a new VP role, or now when I do what I do. And I know it's something that you guys probably do a lot, so I want to hear your perspective. But like, properly understanding the customer, like
mm,
really, like, just get out of your own way, take your shoes on, put your customer shoes on right now, and like, you're at their desk for 7 days. Like, what does that typically look like? What are their pressures? What are their challenges? Maybe you can just talk about the importance, Matt, of properly understanding your customers. Either you're in a VP role right now, or you're in your business and you're about to execute a program, a campaign for a
mm.
customer, and maybe you've never actually prospected into that customer profile before, so you need to understand it. Like, what's that like for you now?
Yeah, I think just to touch on one word that you mentioned there around pressure, and I think it's something that isn't spoken about enough, and it's actually linked back to the original question, which is there's very much an attitude out there of quick win, okay? And if we can generate quick win, then great. And I think we're all on the same page. There's definitely quick wins out there, and the way in which we can generate those opportunities is really varied, okay? But there's low hanging fruit out there. There's a big difference though between what I would call kind of tactical engagement and then engagement that actually gets you into creating a repeatable model. Okay, so we can win one or two accounts, but how do we get that business into a state where actually it's repeatable and predictable? And that is the big leap that I think sometimes people forget. And again, going back to the original question, that's part of the consultative approach that generally we have, which allows us to deeply understand, well, what's working today, what's not working today, and then how can we support that long term. So I'm just picking up on that word there around pressure, because I think it's obviously lives and breathes in every salesperson's kind of day to day. But ultimately, I think there's something that we need to distinguish there between today's pressure and also the long-term pressure of carrying pipeline. And like I said before, having that repeatable model that works for everybody.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's important. Like when you set up shop, like I don't know about you, but when I ask like new customers we're onboarding, hey, can you share like your ICP document, your persona
Mm,
sheets and things like that? I'm like, cool, that's really helpful. When were these last updated? You know, like 3 years ago when we started the business. And I'm like, the game has changed, the market's changed, your business has changed, competitor landscape's completely changed. There's new competitors coming into the market. I think Lovable is going to be a massive disruptor in
yeah.
2026. Because I saw a post on LinkedIn the other
Mm,
day from a VP of HR, and she was like, rather than just buying a employee survey tool off the shelf and only needing 50% and the rest being bloat, I just vibe coded my own one and now I use it in our business. Right. But
yeah.
salespeople, when I talk about competitors and like DIY, they're like, oh, that doesn't really affect me. I'm like, well, it's going to
Right.
affect you moving forward.
Yeah.
Right. So
Yeah.
like really like understanding the customer profile is critical. What are the kind of steps that you guys follow when you onboard a new customer and you need to understand, you know, their customer, their personas, and how to tie all of that back to a value message?
Yeah, again, really good question. I think it leans into that consultative approach generally, right? Where I'm a great believer, and I've got an example for you as well in here. So hang tight for it. But I think that the reality is that every business is different. So the people are different, the products and service might be different, the price point might be different, the target market might be different. You name it. There's definitely things in every business that makes them unique. Okay, so how can you truly understand the mechanics of that business without taking that genuine kind of approach of trying to understand the detail? And we've seen this in many examples when you start to look at even our existing customer base, where you've got businesses that on face value look identical. So the example here is that we've got two organizations, two customers of ours that operate in a very similar market. Okay, they sell very, very similar products and services. But when you actually get into the weeds of their businesses and what makes them different, they are completely different. Now, fundamentally, they sell the same product. Okay, but they sell to two different markets as well. One sells to retail, one sells to marketing. Well, you're talking about two completely different organizations there, right? Two
Yeah.
completely different markets, which then leans into two completely different price points, two completely different talk tracks, lots of different materials, you name it. Okay. So on face value, you look at the website and you go, well, they sell X, Y, and Z, and this business sells X, Y, and Z. But when you start to truly understand the business and the people in that business and the drivers within that business, all of a sudden, like I said before, they're selling the same thing ultimately, but they operate in a very, very different way. And the results are different because of that as well, right? If you're selling into manufacturing or you're selling into retail, as these two examples suggest, you might get very, very different responses from both of those markets. You might find that a competitor has taken retail. Okay, so you've got to wait for contract end dates in that world, but over here in manufacturing, it's not as saturated. So actually, we get a better performance from a campaign. So it's really important that you understand the business and the mechanics of that business so you can then start to tailor the language, the content, how we might approach a particular conversation, you name it. Everything then becomes bespoke, okay, which is one of the challenges for our business as well, right? But that's a challenge generally for any sales leader out there, which is you've got to adapt to who you're selling to and how you might sell and new product innovations or whatever it might be. That all looks different. If again, going back to some of the points we made earlier, if it was a rinse and repeat, then there would be no need for any of that, right? You would just take what we did over here originally 10 years ago and we just rinse and repeat that 10 years later and we get a similar result. It just doesn't work like that. So we've always got to make sure that we're learning, we're evolving. Context is hugely important here as well, right? So long gone are the days where, and we've worked together, right, when this was a thing where actually how many calls have you made or how many emails have you sent and what was the response? Yeah, that's all interesting stuff, right? And we want to make sure that we've got the right amount of activities and the right types of activities happening. But the context is hugely important here as well. We get asked all of the time, not about how many phone calls have you made or how many emails have you sent or how many promising conversations have you had. It's more, what's the market saying? Why are people saying no, right? Why are people saying yes, importantly? Because that then frames how we might tackle a training initiative or how we might tailor a piece of material. And again, that's all very, very different from one customer to the next. The beauty that we have today, right, is that technology does a lot of that for us. So the AI that sits across kind of every area of our business gives us that context in kind of real time rather than having to sit down with a business development rep on a Friday and go tell me all about your week, right? So it is about that deep understanding up front in order to be in a position where you can deliver a really quality program of works for somebody, but also where you start and where you finish typically looks very different. So you have to evolve over a period of time. That comes from the customer, but it also comes from our own experiences. And like I said before, that's where technology plays a huge part.
All right, thanks for listening to this episode. I've got something else I want to give you before we wrap up here. So we've built the leading skill optimization platform with 400 plus sales lessons, 12 courses from prospecting all the way through to late stage deal negotiation and more, one-to-one sales coaching and AI sales assistance. And I want to give you 7 days free access to the platform. The reason I want to do this is because nobody gets a degree in B2B sales. And after training and coaching hundreds of sales reps and teams in the last 2 years, most haven't mastered critical selling skills. And it's preventing them from being promoted, earning great money, and building a great career in B2B sales. So go to the revenueenabler.com, grab a free trial, and join hundreds of salespeople that are closing their skill gaps and mastering sales. There's a link in the video description. I'm looking forward to getting you set up. Give me a shout with any questions.